And feel free to just chime in and interrupt me. I don't know how long this slide's going to go. I know it's not going to go 3 hours.
Oh God.
That sounds like it. That sounds well. Yeah, it's not the data breach investigation report from Verizon, which literally went 3 hours before Jeff shut us down. Which you probably should thank Jeff for that. But
Tim, you have 1 hour. I'm starting the clock now.
I don't know if we're gonna make an hour. Is what I'm saying. I haven't timed it. I try to time these things out, but
40 minutes late than we normally.
right. Well, and yeah. No, I'm counting from now, but I do need to get it to about 40 minutes. So this is supposed to be like a 40-minute slide. I might need to. What I'm saying is it's still a month out, and I just got the slides done, so I haven't had a lot of opportunity to practice.
Did you know
I've had zero opportunity to practice. So
too much Coke and not enough beer here?
right. Well, and but that's why we do it here. See if I need to add stuff, remove stuff.
On Tuesdays. Fortunate.
But feel free to pipe in. I love when people interact. I loved it when we did it in person. That's why I like doing these things at Colasec too, is because everyone's friends here, and feel free to call me on stupid stuff.
You just set the precedent that no one's going to interrupt you, so that we can get through this as fast as possible.
Sure, if you guys want to go out for wings and afterwards, and be my guest.
Flat out wrong, so I can sit here like straining like the meme with that one kid, like.
Well, no one knows anything about IPA. No one knows anything about IPA security, Adam. You do.
I'm willing to walk around the corner if you are. I'm never opposed. A hot one.
Well, yeah. All right, so we're starting. Welcome to the security.
We'll see you later.
All right. I mean, just make sure you take all your stuff and the cooler of Capri Suns with you.
All right.
All right.
We love you, Tim.
I know. I love you guys too. This is why I love you. So the agenda here, we are going to talk about who's GuidePoint, because these are GuidePoint slides, and I am now sales, by the way. I don't know but I try to make this fun, so I don't know if I'm going to get yelled at later, but we're going to go with it. We'll go through why this talk, API basics, how to secure APIs, API security tooling landscape. I won't get into any specifics, but I want to talk about the security tooling as a general, and then resources for API security, and then any questions you have. What do you mean I've reached my final form?
In the balance of living or live long enough to become the villain, he's in his final form.
You are now sales.
All right. Yes. Yeah. No, wait. You guys haven't even seen it. I haven't even been let off the sales leash. So that's a whole nother thing too. I haven't learned everything yet. So like the next 2 years, you guys know me, and I'm a part of Colasec. There will be an evolution. Just saying.
We're gonna have a good long conversation about keeping you on a leash.
You are more than welcome to talk to Rachel about that. She freaking loves me. I just want you to know that. She freaking loves me. And you have no idea. Anyways, I don't do about me slides. And this is my GuidePoint slide, by the way. I will have contact information at the end. I should probably mention the GuidePoint as an application practice. What does that mean? We are called, and get ready for it, application security as a service. It is pretty much, well, it's pretty much what it is, right? So we don't do we do services. We don't do like a block of hours. We sign a contract, and we sign like 6, 12, 18-month contracts, and that's meant for you to have security resources, either from a strategic, technical, or whatever standpoint, that can come in and kind of help out with either building out an AppSec program, or if you have someone tapped for AppSec, we can help support them and try to get some of the initiatives that you want to get done within your application security program. GuidePoint as a whole is a VAR. I don't, honestly, I didn't know what GuidePoint did or what VAR meant for the longest time, but we're a vendor-added resource, which pretty much means that we're a middleman. We can pretty much get you sweet deals on vendor pricing. I will also say that we kind of have that relationship between vendors and clients. And what that does is, instead of you, the client, being able to go to these vendors when we go talk to them because there's an issue or something that you're dealing with. It's not just one client that's complaining about this. It's like all of GuidePoint, right? So we can essentially push things along with a lot of our vendors that a client going directly to the vendor can't. We are vendor agnostic, which means that, you know, we don't have our favorites. But, you know, we have a viewpoint of the landscape. And so that's kind of GuidePoint. I'm still working on my pitch. Again, 2 years from now, this will be very different. I might get yelled at for these slides, but that's kind of GuidePoint. So why this talk? API security is a bit of a hot topic. That's the other reason why I joined GuidePoint, is I get a very broad view of the application security landscape for like talks like this. And I'm seeing it. I'm seeing the API security thing pop up across like multiple clients. So this is a bit of a research project for me. I mean, I'm aware of APIs are a thing, but they've really started popping up a lot more. And I wanted to also use this talk to kind of demystify APIs, because a lot of people think it's this like AI thing. You remove a P and you get AI, but it's really not. It's a lot of the same practices that you have for your application security program can be applicable to an API security strategy. It's just there's just little different nuances here. That's kind of what this talk is meant to kind of demystify and talk about. And I, you know, we'll talk about this a little bit more in security tooling, but there's a lot of vendors switching over to API solutions. So this vendor that used to do this one little thing is now switching over. Oh, we have API protection, and we'll get into more that a little bit more. So it's kind of trying to help navigate some of that. So APIs are becoming in the news a lot more. I think the biggest one from this year was back in January when Sam Curry, is it Curry or Curry? I'm gonna say Curry. Had some research on. Did you guys hear about this? The web hackers versus the auto industry, essentially, where they found that car APIs were vulnerable to pretty much account takeover and stuff. Did you guys hear about this?
No.
Yes.
Yeah. So 18 vehicles plus Siri XSM connected vehicle services were vulnerable to API attacks. So we'll talk about some of the research here. So there's full account takeover on BMW and Rolls-Royce via misconfigured SSO. There's full account takeover on Ferrari with access to modify and delete customer information. Full remote vehicle access and account takeover for Hyundai and Genesis and Honda, Nissan, Infiniti, Acura. And then there was full vehicle takeover on Nissan via mass assignment. So those are not like unknown brands. Those are some pretty well-known brands. So like the ones in particular, right, is full account takeover of Ferrari. It's like, you no longer own this Ferrari. I do. It's under my account. Right. And a lot of this are, you know, APIs. And I feel like we're kind of, you know, and maybe this is just life in general, but I feel like, you know, security, you guys remember the whole Jeep takeover article from like several years ago, where they essentially stopped a journalist breaks from working. Like they did this in a parking lot, not on the highway, but essentially like some hackers were able to do it if they were by the car. Like this is like evolved into like you don't even need to be near the car anymore. You just need to hack the API for the system.
Like 2012, man, that's been like a decade.
That's what I'm saying. It's a lot like 3D. Remember 3D came out in the 80s, and then it kind of had this resurgence in like 2010s.
Tim, wasn't a lot of it like the authentication code that needed to be input was the VIN?
Yep. So that yeah, their security was just have the VIN number. It's 16 characters.
It's only printed on a little card that you can see through the windshield.
Well, and it's gotten even better, Jeff. Now it's on the side of the door, you know, because I found this out recently because I had to put in a claim for my car because it got backed into by an 18-wheeler. But they said, yeah, go look at, just pull open your driver's side door, and you know all those stickers with all the cautions and
Side of the door for like decades and decades.
Yeah.
right. But that's what I'm saying. Is that like what?
2001 Jeep with that.
I had a 1965 Chevrolet C10 step side pickup truck that had that.
Damn. And the reality
And it was
is,
a metal plate at that time.
you know, it's super easy to enumerate off of any of them with just a sample of what you got. So
Last 6 of the VIN.
Right. Well, so you want to talk about writing down your passwords? Let's write down your VIN number on the car that someone can just go take over.
Yeah, and now you have to be open. I just looked
Yeah.
at
Yep.
Even Teslas have to have VIN numbers, right? That's a federal law.
Yeah.
Like the way they. So
VIN numbers are the social security number for cars. So if you have the social security number,
can we use this to like have the car drive itself to me?
I don't know if we're there yet, but we're getting there because at some point
That I want.
look, they're gonna have like they're. I guarantee you, the car companies are already planning to put AI into the car. It's just gonna happen.
Yeah, but I mean, hell, that doesn't even
Oh,
matter.
who was the actor that voiced Kit?
Perfect example, AI, right?
Yeah, Knight Rider. It's gonna happen.
I mean, you could do that. I mean, there's easy way like Siri, start my car. And, you know, instead of having to go find the key and double click the button to remote
Sure.
start it, just have your.
I can't wait
Alexa
until my
do it.
3-year-old starts giving the car commands and the car obeys.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep, because he has your same voice pattern.
Yeah. Well, I mean, your 3-year-old can order whatever they want off your Amazon account right now. So.
If they look like you. If they look
Alexa,
like you.
steal my car.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing too: is we're gonna have devices on it that show us where it's at. So
Anyway, back to your presentation, please, Ted.
Yep.
We've wasted 4 of your precious minutes.
no, that's good. Again, going for I really want to beat the 3-hour mark. So API, what is an API? Application programming interface. And I would love a great analogy for APIs because I've been trying to find a really good one. But it's a set of functions and procedures allowing the creation of applications that access the features or data of an operating system, application, or other service. That's the Oxford language, by the way. I don't know if anybody has a really good thing. And Adam probably knows this person. I tried to explain APIs to our GRC folks, which means I can't use that terminology. I get inherently what an API is, and I'm kind of like, well, it's like a spaceship with a port, and this is where the Security Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy really comes in, right? If you know the movie, Perfect Ford hops on a spaceship, right? And to me, that could be he got unauthorized access to a spaceship by using one of their APIs. I don't know if that hits with anybody or if that is a really good description, but like it's essentially a way for people to interact with something that's put out there or not put out there because there can be internal things, but it's a way for people or systems to interact with another system. And this is where there's a lot of benefit for developers, and that it allows them, instead of having to write custom code constantly, they can just put this API out there with certain parameters on how to interact with it.
Tim,
Go ahead,
you
Jeff.
got the name wrong.
What?
Ford Prefect.
Ford Prefect. Thank you.
I was struggling not to like, Tim, what the hell's wrong with you?
No, tell me. Like I didn't say perfect either, because it's not perfect. It's prefect, which is, like you said, it's the car, it's just such a great scene when he's saying hello and bringing flowers to shake the hand of a Ford Prefect as it comes tumbling down the street at him. And this to me is a really great movie, by the way. Books, like Adam said, are good, but to me this is a pretty good adaptation. So APIs actually started in the 1940s and 1950s, and then papers were starting to be written in the 1960s and 1970s. The term was coined in the 1980s. And then in the 1990s, expanded to remote procedure calls and web APIs, which is kind of what we're dealing with here is API. So this idea has been around for a long time, and and even the 1990s, right? We were just talking about that. and the fact that cyber was a very different term back then too. But APIs have been around for a really long time. It's just that they've really gained a lot of popularity recently.
What's a 1940s example of API? I don't grasp it. I don't know if anybody else does.
Well, and it's just the idea. So back then there was a lot of like just a lot of theory and talking about programming languages. And you think about like Alan Turing and his whole system to decrypt the German encryption, right? So there's been a lot of like, and that, even back then that's kind of automation, because there's no way someone can do that by hand. But if you put these systems in place to kind of do a lot of your calculations and figuring out a lot of this stuff, that can really start the theory of it was there. What they weren't actually there. No one was using APIs back in the 40s and 50s. The U.S. tanks did not have an API system in them other than a human being.
Gotcha.
But that's a good call out. I probably need to expand on that a little bit more. But it was just, like I said, more theory.
So APIs were invented by Galileo, is what you're saying.
Yes. And his telescope could be considered an API because you look into it and you get certain parameters. I don't know. It's not a great analogy either.
That rubber band is about to break, man.
It is absolutely. I will tell you, I have a lot of imposter syndrome on this talk because like you go into this stuff and there's a lot there. And one of the next things I want to talk about is, have you guys heard of SOAP versus REST APIs?
Yeah.
Yes.
So SOAP is a little bit older by 2 years, and it's like I always thought there was two API formats, SOAP and REST. I didn't realize that there's actually more, and there's more coming out. APIs are going to become a lot like the JavaScript language, where there's going to be a new framework probably every other week. But SOAP came out of XML RPC, which is that remote procedural call, and it uses XML for messaging format and receives requests via HTTP or SMTP. Not really SMTP, but it's still, the support's there for it. It's easier for apps running in different environments or written in different languages. So it's a lot more, to me, the way I've seen it is that like a lot of developers see SOAP as a little bit older format and they want to go to REST, which has a lot more flexibility. And you can add different layers and do a bunch of different stuff with it. And there's really, for people that don't fully understand APIs, including myself, there's not a lot that you can really, like, I don't want to get too deep into the technical, one, because I don't fully understand it, but two, it can get very confusing. And I have a lot of notes here that kind of talk about some of the confusing stuff that I don't fully understand. But it is stateless, so no content is stored. Catching can eliminate the need for some server client interactions, so it's faster. But it adds like, it can add a bunch of different layers for like load balancing, caches, and security and things like that. Couple of the different API policies. There are private, which would be internal, partner, which is third-party integration, and you see a lot more, particularly like in the SaaS space, where you're allowed to integrate within an API. And then public, which means anyone can like tap into the API and use. So for public, it could be, I think Google Maps has some sort of API capabilities that allows you to tap into it. There's a lot of different services out there that you can kind of tap into. So I know my nephew was working on an app that would overlay over one of the like Spotify or something to make it easier for you. Like he could build an app that could allow you to have a better interface for like Spotify or Amazon Music or some other app within your phone. So APIs are all over the place, and they allow people to kind of plug into and do different things, and even just scrape information. So researchers can use it to scrape, any sort of thing. But then like third party, right? It's kind of like a good example would be like a Salesforce or a ServiceNow, where they kind of have this platform available and you can plug in and do different things with that API that you need to do. I know within the financial space, there's a lot of APIs for integrating different financial systems together. And then of course, private is just kind of like internally developed APIs that you allow other systems to connect to each other. What happened? Let me restart that. I couldn't hit next. And my timer restarted, so I'm back to just seconds right now. When I was doing so when I was doing some research on this, one of the great ones one report that I really liked that I found a lot of useful information out was the Postman. It was the state of the API report back in August of 2022. So here's who uses APIs. I'll let you read through this and I just want people to call out some of their favorite people who use APIs.
I'm at the bottom.
Other?
Well, not that one. Network engineer, security engineer. I'm at the bottom.
Yeah. No, that's good. My shock was CTO and CEO. I'm like, who is letting the executives use an API, like spin up an API and use it?
Yeah, that makes me wonder if some front-end developer hasn't used an API, given it to their CEO to pull a view of data from some back-end source.
And they're calling that access.
I'm with you guys. I went to startups as one of the first things I saw of is a CEO. It's someone that says they're a CEO, but they're like one of two people at a startup. But yeah,
I can see that skewing the numbers too.
yeah.
So is a dashboard an API or not?
Well, I mean,
They would need to use one.
if you've got an API key and you're plugged into it through whatever the interface is, then
Yeah. To me, this isn't dashboards. This is people actually doing some sort of programming or interacting with the API specifically from like a command line interface or something else. So they have to do some sort of programming.
Yeah, so the person that built the dashboard for the CEO is the one using it.
Or the CEO is building his own dashboards, which is scary in itself. I mean,
Well, but I mean, there are a lot of, like in Splunk or in Elastic, you can build dashboards, and those, depending on where that's at, there could be those automated type systems that allow you to drag and drop graphs and data tables and things like that.
right.
That
Well,
would be interacting through an API to the back end.
Right. Yeah. So I mean,
But
over
you're
half.
probably right. But
Yeah, I mean, but everybody thinks of developers as the only ones really interacting direct with APIs, right? I just was aghast that like director manager is like right behind a front developer, like not far behind a front developer as far as and security, by the way, security got beat by the CTO and the CEO. So security is not even using APIs, and we probably should be. But it's still like, to me, it still highlights, right? There's a massive increase, and it's not just developers. Everyone's spinning up in APIs nowadays, and we can talk about it. You're right, talking about dashboards, but there's this thing called citizen developers. Are they starting to spin up APIs with plug and play code and stuff? And we'll get into like how to actually stand up a API and the effort level taken there. But like, to me, it just kind of mystifies, like it's just developers doing it. It's like everybody. You think about, like I said, financial people. They might take a lot of this into their own hands to try and use an API. Business analysts is on this list. Product managers. Kind of some of the ones that are just out of the norm.
It sounds like APIs are harder to use than AI. Because, like, for me, I don't, like, it says less than 5% use of an API.
Well,
I
it's
probably
about-
agree, right? For me, as a network engineer / security engineer, I don't even know. I'm still trying to grasp what an API is. as opposed to it not being some form of a user interface. It sounds like the same thing. Is there a difference?
Kind of is a user interface, except that there is no graphical. There's nothing human usable about an API. You're using code to feed it data, and it's giving you data back in return, and doing some sort of useful work, right? Like there are APIs for things like the APC power management system in your data center that you can go and interact with and like get the power stats off of all of the racks in your data center and see like there's a breaker trip somewhere, or one of your UPSs is reporting it's got a bad battery, or any number of things, right? So APIs are literally just hooks. It's a program sitting there with a web interface usually that you can interact with via whatever mechanism you want, whether that's a script running on your computer or a full-blown program you've written to interact with that API. The point is the developer doesn't have to worry about what all that other software is. All they do is present the interface, and then it has a certain set of functions that it's going to provide to you, and they're in a lot of cases an API will come with a definition, and there's several different competing standards out there, but that definition gives you basically a map of these are all the features and services you can get from this API, and if you feed it this data, it should give you back this data. So
it's a language agnostic workhorse.
Basically, yeah. But so you can look into a lot of like the diagnostic platforms. SolarWinds has an API that you can interact with. You can write your own scripts, interact with SolarWinds, and pull data out of it that way.
Okay.
So you don't have to learn the language that SolarWinds is written in to modify it and make it do things. You can use PowerShell or Perl or
that's kind of like
whatever
what YAML is, though, right?
Yeah, YAML is a data structure. So it's a human readable format for information. A lot of APIs consume YAML, and like it is a way to for the machine to produce information that a human can go and read, that isn't like a database page somewhere.
Okay, but so but that application interface doesn't need to make it humanized at all. It can just take your data,
it can, yeah.
given that you're using the language it uses.
Because you're going to feed it, like you'll pass it an array via an HTTP request, and it's going to return an array to you. It doesn't care how you read that. It's not worried about that. It's going to provide the data, and you got to have some machine on your end to catch that data and present it back however you want. Whether that's something human readable, or if you're going to have a script that goes and interacts with an API and then interacts with a different API and moves data from one system to another.
So to me, I just thought of a good example. Tell me, I love this conversation, by the way, and I love the question because it is helping me kind of figure out. But to me, it could be considered kind of like a video game, and I'm going to go very simple with this, like a Nintendo or a Game Boy or something with like 2 buttons and a control, right? You interacting with that is kind of like interacting with the API. You can't fly necessarily, but you can jump, or you can sprint, or you can move left or right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean
It's a fairly basic.
The API is ultimately the controller. That's your interface for interacting with the game. And the API, depending on what system you're using, and that's why those API definition standards are so important, is because it gives you a file. A lot of those export a YAML file from the API and gives you a map of the API. These are all the functions it has. These are all the arguments those functions expect, and this is the values they should return, and the useful work that those functions should do. And if you don't have those, it's just a guessing game. You're kind of just feeding it data. What does it do? What does it give me?
And
Maybe in Tim's example of the controller that has buttons that you can configure to do different things, you take that API data and you configure that in a button, and then when you press that button, it does it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going for, Jeff. And like, and really, that's not how you want to interact with API. You don't want to be in there pushing the buttons. You want to write something that tells you go complete this level, or go pull this information, or so there's almost a bit of automation. and it's or have this essentially what API is doing is it's having a system's making it available so that another system can interact with it and do something useful with it that meets some sort of business case. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can work with that for a while.
And that's yeah. I mean, it's a great question, and that's what I'm trying to find out is what's a good example that really resonates with people as far as.
For me, I'm thinking telephone receiver. You know, the ones you used to pick up off the wall.
Yeah.
If you're sending it through the wire, it doesn't matter if you're sending it through fiber, it doesn't matter if this is going through switches, it doesn't matter if it's going on an actual telephone line, the other person can still pick up the other line. The receiver is the interface.
Yes. And you can only, yeah, and you can only do, but with an API, it's much more restricted about what you can actually do with it. Because the developer's saying, if you're going to talk to me, you're going to do these specific things. So it could almost be like an IVR system, whereas you're calling in and it's saying, press this or this to reach to this.
Yeah, I can dig that. Well, I mean, because it wouldn't work on a clothesline, right? Even though that line may stretch from one house to the next.
Right.
They're not gonna be able to pick up the phone on that side because that's not the language it's using. It's using one of the other ones.
Right.
I mean, for me, that's making sense right now.
Okay, cool. Good to know. To Adam's point, this doesn't fully fall into what he's talking about with like documentation and specifications. We'll get into that a little bit later, but there is a term called API first, which is pretty much you're not doing a bunch of custom development. You're doing a lot more APIs, and that's I think where we're seeing a lot of APIs kind of popping up all over the place is because it makes the developer's life a lot easier because they can create this code and then have people interact with it, and they can just adjust the API instead of having to write a bunch of custom code. So instead of interacting with Salesforce and writing custom code all the time, they can just plug into an API, or they can create on the other end, they can create an API for other people to interact with them. And it's a very favorable term within the dev community. And you can see here, this is what they thought as the most important qualities of an API: performance, security, which is great to see that at number 2, that quality is a top priority. But they also talked about, API first orgs. They're happier, launch new products faster, eliminate security risks sooner, create better software, and are more productive. And that also leads into a greater outlook for more upbeat hiring, employee retention, and spending increase despite economic outlook. To me, APIs are like kind of the next evolution, and a lot like kind of foster a lot of automation within kind of the development space. And we'll get into it a little bit more about APIs and their security ramifications. But one of the big things to call about why security might be so high is that you're not really susceptible with APIs to some of the traditional things you find in web apps. Injections on the list for SQL injection and cross-site scripting, but it's actually more about authorization, authentication. So are you setting up your APIs in a way that's going to keep the bad guys from doing things that's not intended? That's the big thing. So how to build an API. I don't know if you guys have seen Pitch Meeting, but this is a great Pitch Meeting is a great YouTube video to watch if you want to.
You're embracing your sales role very well with that.
Yep. So this is how you stand up an API, like no bullshit. And I'm going to do some more like in-depth, like messing with APIs that I haven't necessarily touched with, but on YouTube, standing up a REST API takes 10 minutes, and it's 3 steps: clone the project, npm install, npm run, win. And this has been out here for 7 years, by the way.
But that's telling me how to do it. It's just doing it.
No, you literally could go to this GitHub. You're cloning the project. npm install, npm run on a command line. I mean, you might have to install npm if you don't have it. Sorry, there might be a four-step
Going to
there.
have to learn a little bit of web development to build the API to do something useful. Yes.
Sure, but you can stand this up, and you've got an API stood up, right?
At least getting to the point of there's a thing you can poke at is solved.
Yeah. Stupid easy, right?
Yeah.
Well, and if if you go into the to-do list controller, it's going to set up everything for you. And I looked through a couple different tutorials, and it's a lot of the same things. There's like 10 steps, 10 minutes, 10 steps, whatever. It doesn't take long, and that's why APIs have gained a lot of popularity too. Is that they're just being, they're just super easy to spin up. You can also use.
This must be a developer thing because it still seems.
Just use ChatGPT. I'm sure ChatGPT can tell you how to spin up an API.
100%.
Maybe that should be my demo. Let's go to ChatGPT and how to build an API. Yeah, APIs are absolutely a developer thing. And again, it's a developer thing because it makes their job easier. They don't have to develop as much custom code. They can just put an API out there. You want this? All right. You want a new feature? All right. Let me write that code. Leave me alone. I'm going to go off and do my other job, or I'm going to go mess with ChatGPT for the next 5 hours.
And really, that's what it all boils down to. APIs got the push because you were paying vendors buku dollars to develop interfaces that would work between their product and something else that you had. So this just eased that burden. They just provide the interface and you connect to it using that. That's really what it is.
And a dipstick like me that has a little bit of scripting knowledge and access to both APIs can build the interface at home. I don't need their developers, and I don't need them to. I don't have to deal with their development cycles. It's just
right.
Now, when I figure out that their API doesn't do something right or doesn't do everything we need it to do, then I have to deal with it. But
Yep. No, that's it's essentially what it is, right? And reporting's probably a pretty good example too, because for some reason they can't just give me the reports. It's like, oh, we have an API for reporting, so you just go pull whatever you want, which can be beneficial if you only need to pull certain things. But now you actually have to know how to interact with their API and build something that you have to figure out their API to figure out what you actually want to pull.
Yeah.
So I just posted
API. Because you're literally programming when you tell it to do something. Hey, figure this out.
Yes. Yes.
Programming, right? So
yes,
is an API.
Kind of.
Because that's the AI is the interface. That communicates.
We're building an analogy house of cards in this presentation.
Well, and I mean, I'm just trying to understand it. I mean, for me, it makes sense, but I don't know, because I'm not a developer.
Neither am
switches,
I.
routers,
and this is why I've struggled to explain APIs, because I understand what they are, but really trying to explain it to people from different backgrounds that don't have a development background, I have really struggled with it. That's why I really want to if I could hone in what really clicks for you, would definitely I think click for a lot of other people. And
instead of coming up with metaphors, maybe use examples of here's how Palo Alto's API. Here's some things you can do.
But see, that's the thing. Now I got to go into GRC. And they don't know anything, but if I have to have a network example, now I have to have a EDR example, and now I've got to have a China example, and now I've got to have an AI example. Yeah, that's why I try to keep an analogy is something simple, and maybe the cars one is the best one, right? Let's
put in about the bartender. I mean, we can.
I wanted to get to that. I was going to actually call that out. So thanks for calling that out.
We've been reading while you were talking.
Oh, well. Yeah, I do want to call it some adjust here, like a bartender.
Use Palo Alto Panorama.
Mm-hmm.
So
actually, Jeff, I think that bartend one is a really good one, right? You walk up to a bar and you go, "Do you have this?" And they go, "No, but we have this." Or
we can interface with and say, "Hey, whatever your policy is for whatever this rule set is in Panorama, change it to something else, and I'm going to tell you what to change it to."
Okay.
So my security program, like, system, whatever it is, can call Palo Alto Panorama and say, with that API, and it's got its structured set of arguments that it will allow, and I can say get policy of malware protection, whatever it is, and then change it to something else, or add something
those
to
are,
it, or whatever. Like,
you can use those are like external dynamic lists. So it's
Yeah.
basically something. It's let's see that I call that automation because they're taking a script.
And,
Now I can't tell you what the difference between automation API and AI is.
well, but automation is kind of is automation is something you want to do with an API because you, like I said, you don't want to interface with it manually. You want to build something that's going to interface with that API to automate. So pulling reports, you're not going to go pull a report manually. You're going to set it up to every time I hit this button, it's going to go to the API and pull what I need out of it.
Dig it.
Yeah. And apparently Jeff said that the second description, which I'll read here, is from ChatGPT.
Yeah, I asked ChatGPT, what is an API? And that 2 paragraphs was what it told me.
API stands for Application Programming Interface. It is a set of rules, protocols, and tools for building software applications. An API defines how different software components should interact with each other. In simpler terms, an API is a way for different software systems to communicate with each other. It allows developers to create software applications that can access and use functionalities of other application platform services without having to understand the underlying code. That's a really good description, and I'm taking it.
Use that one, Tim, because that's a summation of everything we've been talking about.
Yeah, and I think it does it in a pretty good format, right?
why didn't you just have ChatGPT write this presentation for you?
That I will. You know what? Maybe I should try that. I might try that between now and.
API.
You should use
Um,
ChatGPT's API to write your presentation.
Maybe that needs to be the next cul-de-sac meeting. Have somebody
I was actually going to suggest that as
security functions for us.
We should do an RFC for that, or RFP, excuse me.
yeah. I was actually going to say Jeff could do his next month's presentation, and we just mess around with ChatGPT the entire time.
I have a software tester API related joke. Do you want it?
Sure.
So an application tester is testing out an API, orders a beer, then orders 3 beers, orders 99 beers, orders -1 beers. Everything works as expected. Customer walks in the bar, asks where the bathroom is. Bar explodes.
Yeah.
Does not compute.
Didn't bother testing that feature. It's fine.
All right. So how to secure your APIs. This is where we're getting into really a lot of it. And a lot of this stuff is the basics that you really should be doing with any sort of application security program. Step 1, inventory your APIs. Know where they're at.
How many APIs do you have?
Yeah. How many APIs do you have?
Hey, that's most def.
I was gonna say, I thought it looked familiar.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Mos Def played Ford Prefect in the movie. It's great.
Supporting actor or whatever.
Oh, word?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's really good in this too. By the way, he is awesome in this movie.
Yeah. He's the alien, Ford Prefect. When he first arrives on Earth, he mistakes cars as the dominant life form. And
I'm gonna watch this movie.
yeah,
I've
it's
seen
great.
it before, man. But when did it come out? Like
2004.
yeah,
Yeah,
like
like a
almost
long
20
time
years
ago.
ago. That's
I have. So this is sad, but I have people working for me that have never seen this movie, and that's why I was like, some of these memes are not people are not gonna get. But
How old is this movie?
yeah, 20 years old.
How did
yeah, I probably have some 20-year-olds working for me.
Isn't that a remake?
Yeah.
I'm sure there's an old Bruce.
Yeah. There are some 19s.
I'm gonna age myself, so I remember like manually hard coding my RC, my PC,
Oh god.
assigning my IRQs. That was it,
Oh, yeah.
IRQs.
I'm
So
sorry.
Oh yeah.
You said RC, I'm thinking
Yeah.
RC controller card.
No.
And I'm thinking you had
Then
to
I was thinking
program
you were
that.
talking about
then I went to
programming.
then I went to perch in my head, and I'm like, why am I talking
When
about
you started-
IRC? And I'm
Yeah,
like,
when you were looking for IRC, I
Yeah.
thought you were about to
No.
start talking about video tuner cards and
No.
manually configuring them.
No, not quite that bad, but yeah.
Well, and yeah, there was a 1970s, I think, TV show, and this was definitely on the radio in England. So it's been around. Like the Security Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy has been around for a while. Even the movie, a lot of purists say is kind of new age, and it's old at this point. It's also Morgan Freeman too, by the way. He played the Hobbit.
Forgot about that.
He was also Watson and Sherlock with. Yeah, that's a good one, Jeff.
Nice.
Martin Freeman, by the way.
Martin Freeman. Thank you,
Freeman. And my brain was like,
Adam. You should just be doing this presentation. I don't know why I'm up here presenting. I don't know why. I should just build the slides. I should be Adam's AI, and then he just corrects everything that I made a mistake on.
I wouldn't have known there was that many brothers out there hitchhiking in the galaxy.
oh boy.
I don't think Morgan Freeman played J5 Dual Bribe, did he?
I said Friedman. I didn't say. Yeah.
Earliest
Right.
thing I remember him from was Easy Reader from the electric company.
All right,
wow.
we've completely derailed your presentation. Please continue, Tim.
This is Cul-de-sac. Welcome to Cul-de-sac.
Welcome to Cul-de-sac.
I'm reading your text because I don't know why you would text me during a presentation, but
Favorite way to give you notes because it's distracting.
okay, okay, this is going down. That had nothing to do with it. Microservices, what? Anyways, so how to identify your APIs? There is no tooling that's going to do it for you. Like anything, I would say Run Zero might come the closest, which used to be Rumble, but that will identify everything on your network, so it's not necessarily API focused. Yeah, Rumble. Yeah, have you not heard about this? It was it did pretty much network scanning and would provide you a lot of good information on your environment. It's now been renamed to Run Zero. Would definitely check it out. It's one of those useful low cost tools. I don't know how low cost it is at this point, but it's a really good tool for that. So how to identify this? How to identify APIs? Well, one, work with your development teams. You can, if they're doing Postman and Swagger files, you can use that to, within the repos, identify APIs. Pen testers are usually pretty good at finding a lot of APIs within an environment because they know how to use things like Run Zero, aka Rumble. The other thing I pointed to is vulnerability management. If you have some sort of vulnerability management scanner for your entire environment, that can help you potentially identify it. And then, of course, your endpoint detection and response platform, which should be everywhere, might help you identify. And help you identify some of the things either installed on the system or traffic. And I've talked to people kind of in the SOC SIEM world, and even like trying to identify certain traffic. And some of the vendors I've seen really, and this goes back to pen testers, really just use a word list of within API documentation, like how like when you stand up a web server and API might have certain things like website/admin. APIs kind of have the same thing. So you could potentially set up a word list to try and identify that stuff. But I don't know that I've found really anybody that's done a really good job on focusing on APIs. A lot of the API vendors they kind of act like a WAF and they look for similar traffic and then kind of call that stuff out.
Question.
Yeah.
Can the API itself be a threat?
Sure. It's properly configured.
No, I'm not talking about the API and its instructions that it's sending, but I'm saying the API itself. Can, in the video game example, can the controller be a threat? If I don't push no buttons on it, the controller be a threat. It can send threats, I get that, from what I understand. But can the controller itself? Be
I would
a
say
threat?
it's more akin to being a vulnerability, right? Like it's vulnerable
I-
that is meant to interact. It's meant to be interacted with remotely and provide services. And so, in the same way that like any other application that can be accessed across your network can be a threat, it's
Yes.
isn't inherently because of the API. It's a vulnerable system.
Yeah, and API is neither good nor bad. It's the intent of the developer and sometimes the unintent, right? So one of the things I was thinking about was Cambridge Analytica, right, which is tapping into Facebook's API for whatever it was providing, but it was taking a lot of that data and doing some very shady stuff with it.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
And whether it's an ingrown or an ingrown API,
An ingrown API.
or a API that you didn't realize was installed alongside whatever platform you're using, like you got to know that those things exist and secure them appropriately.
I think, and I think that's the key there is if you don't know what your APIs are doing, and that's where a lot of them become a threat potentially, because if they're leaking or providing more access than they should to people, and that a lot of companies get in trouble for that, is that like an API, and I don't know if people consider S3 buckets APIs, but I recently was reading where people were considering S3 buckets. And if you open up an S3 bucket that has a bunch of sensitive information in it that shouldn't be on the web, that's not a good thing. That could be considered a threat.
I want to fight it.
I'm with you. I'm just saying, in my research,
Now-
I've seen S3 associated with, because probably at the end of the day, AWS is all just APIs.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could even think of something like a Lambda function as an API. You've built a specific way to have a function call into something and make an action. So I would call that an API. But I think I agree that S3 is a storage bucket that has APIs attached to it.
Yeah. And that's also just, let's confuse APIs even further, right? Entire websites are built on APIs now, right? The entire websites are built on APIs. They're APIs, and then they just have a front end versus traditional, development where you don't have API. You have microservices. Let's talk about microservices. Have you talked about? Yeah. Anyways.
I appreciate that you had to mute yourself mid. Like, nope.
All right, let's talk about requirements and standards. This is one of the because sometimes I spend a lot of time looking at memes for this presentation, by the way. And sometimes I don't always find the good Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy meme, but this is also one of my favorite XKCD memes. I like to align a lot of requirements and standards to what developers should already be doing. And I will tell you, within the development space, they're thinking about security. There is something called the Open API specification. Would highly recommend using that for any sort of requirements, because it talks about a lot of the authentication, authorization stuff within there. Like, to me, this is something that I pitch a lot within these AppSec talks. Quality code is secure code. A lot of what we're here to do is just call out that they're not coding things in the proper way that the language already says they should code, right? There are some nuances with newer stuff where they're not secure by default. Let's talk, MongoDBs used to like just grab a public IP if you spun them up. So you actually had to go turn off the public IP or make it not a public IP. But a lot of languages nowadays really build security in, and you have to almost go in and turn security off for it to actually be vulnerable, which a lot of people do because they go to Stack Overflow and read about, hey, this thing isn't working, and someone's like, well, turn the security off, and they go, and they're like, okay, cool, I tried this, and then the fourth or fifth comment down's going, no, don't do that. So I like to align with a lot of that stuff. OAuth API top 10 is another kind of standard that I think is really good. It talks about, and again, this is where we're kind of getting into where APIs are very different. 4 of the top 5 OWASP API top 10 is authentication or authorization. 6 of the top 10 involve authentication. So authentication and authorization are a huge part of APIs and their concerns. Injection is number 8. 10 is logging. 9 is inventory, and 4 is resource constraint. So, and this is why people don't like some of the top 10s, because they bring in some of this stuff. But that's why APIs also have kind of a benefit as far as security goes, right? You're going to have injection, but it's the 8th biggest concern as far as what they've done with the OWASP API top 10. So if you're looking to build standards around that stuff, you really have to look at authentication or authorization, which is in the Open API standard, by the way. Another big one is threat modeling, and I love threat modeling because you can go into scenarios, and what threat modeling does that a lot of tooling, because you still want to use your SaaS, DAST, SCA stuff for a lot of this stuff. Again, we'll talk about API security tooling, but threat modeling is really going to call out and help you identify potential authentication and authorization stuff. And really kind of identify what can go wrong within an API you're building out. And APIs can be fairly harmless. It can talk about, we got a lot of public information available for people to do research on, and like good research on like social stuff, and like I said, traffic with Google Maps, a variety of different things there. But if you're talking about sharing sensitive data with like a partner, that can, and you're putting it over the internet, that can start getting into some different scenarios. And that's where like threat model is really going to call out some of that stuff. Some of the things also to consider would be like caching strategy, error handling, and validation. If you put that, and validation kind of goes back to the injection stuff, but also if people start throwing, like if you have an API that collects data, that can provide a lot of junk into stuff. So having some sort of validation, and validation can be something as simple as only have this many characters if that's all you're going to expect. Of course, manual testing. I'm so glad I got to use this meme by the way, because I found it and I was like, I have no idea what this is, but this is a great place for manual testing. Manual testing is a good opportunity to also, in live production, or not production, but in a test environment, test out some of these business logic flaws. Something to be concerned with, right? That I've really seen throughout my career is that when you have these, what I call monopoly money, but they're really like coupons, or if you're like at a wellness site where, you get points for some sort of financial compensation, whether it's, whatever it is, that's still tied to like some sort of real money. And so that's what attackers are going to go after. So you have coupon codes for like a commercial site, they can go, exploit that and check out more things on a commerce site than they really should be able to do. And there's stories of this all over the place. And so those are some of the things you really want to be concerned with. Another thing in testing that I've seen from some of my pen testers that have tested APIs is finding tokens and credentials just within these APIs. That's another, and that kind of goes back to authentication authorization. Are you putting secrets in the right place? Because if you're putting in their APIs publicly for someone to find, then they can log into systems, going back to the LastPass incident, although that's not, a little bit different. But if they're in the APIs, then you just have a win that the attacker can get into other systems and start exploiting S3 buckets or whatever. And then of course, you want to be testing for injection, because there still can be things, not cross-site scripting so much, but SQL injection is a big concern within APIs. And then of course the tooling, I've already mentioned SaaS, DAST, SCA. One thing that I've really kind of found that's actually a developer tool, but I think can really provide security with a lot of benefit, is API management platforms. Azure has this. I think Google app has one called Apogee. There are API management where you kind of put these you pretty much send these APIs through these management platforms, and that allows you to get visibility, inventory, and then also set up logging. And this is all, to me, kind of developers that are kind of dealing with the API management platforms. And then there's, of course, API security tooling. Before we jump into API security tooling, any questions, comments on kind of the strategy overall, things there? Like I said, it's fairly basic, straightforward stuff. And to me, I wouldn't put, like, that's a lot like the AppSec program strategy that you want to put in place.
Damn, I might have to join y'all by phone, depending on how much you got left.
I don't have a whole lot, so.
We've only got about 3 minutes left, so we're good.
Cool.
You're across the 1 hour mark, my friend.
Oh, am I at the 1 hour mark?
Yeah.
Hey, that's
Okay.
my fault, Tim, for real.
No, you're good. No. You had some really great questions and stuff. Look, man, I took notes. So you're gonna help me. Well, and you know, the security tool, the API security landscape is not. It's not going to be long. It's not a silver bullet. You should be really honest with vendors. To me, there's kind of two ways that API security companies are addressing this, and honestly, a lot of them are just pivoting out of like the WAF space or some other network standpoint space to go, oh yeah, we do APIs. DAST, they're telling you that they can test APIs now. WAF is saying they can block malicious stuff to API. So this is not very different from a website. It's just the different medium in which it's being sent to stuff. So we're seeing a lot of people kind of shift their things there. So the multiple ways are kind of the WAF, which to me makes sense. If they can identify the API traffic, they can give you alerting on stuff, and they can block certain things within within your APIs. But a WAF is still a WAF, and I feel like a lot of people have WAFs in place now. The other method, which I've really seen, and it's a very niche group, is evaluating Swagger. I said ape high. Now you got Swagger. It is. This is the fourth one. I don't know. I lost count. But looking at Swagger Postman files and what's so, and maybe what I need to do is explain what Swagger is, but it's pretty much documentation for the API and how it operates. And so there are vendors starting to look at these and kind of call out certain issues within these documentation that you can try to go address and get done. Now, the downside to that is that your developers actually have to be documenting their APIs for it to actually be useful. So that might be a whole nother thing, but it can really dig into some of that. So really, within the API security space, you either have a WAF or you have a SaaS for APIs. And you still have SaaS for APIs. So let me just confuse that even further. But since we're running short on time, resource for API security, OWASP. There's also something called the vulnerable API, which you can spin up a vulnerable API and test against if you want to learn more about like actually testing it against APIs. And then, like I said, the reports used here, there's a Google API report, Postman. And then I wrote a GuidePoint Security blog.
You got a typo.
What?
It's Goggle API, my friend.
It is Goggle API. I can't say Google, can I?
Okay.
Hold on, that's another note. Goggle. Questions?
We'll text it to you.
Yeah. Thank you. No, I've already wrote it down. Don't text me. Please don't text me.
Jackie Robinson's number.
That was good. I definitely think
42.
to explain more of the, like, when you refine this presentation, use more of the, like, it's used system to system, like some of the explanation that ChatGPT gave us.
I mean, I don't know if you saw me copy it directly from chat into the presentation, but I am totally using that description because I think that is the most clear and concise. And I think it'd be funny too to be like, here's what ChatGPT says about APIs.
But for me, it would help to see actual examples of an API. Like, what would be an example of an API as opposed to like a metaphor? I think that would help better. Like,
Yeah, because it's less blurry. Put it like that.
yeah.
Well, and APIs are everywhere. That's kind of why I talk about the car hacking thing, right? Because you can think about that as an API.
But that's abusing an API by some like.
Yeah, I need an API like your example with the Nintendo controller is close.
Okay,
You know?
I'll think about that one because I don't think it's better than I've had before with spaceships and stuff. But
Hey, Tim, I dropped the link for the Google Drive APIs. You might want to take a look because I think something like Google Drive is known by just about everybody. It's kind of a neutral-ish idea of what could you do through an API to Google Drive? Because everybody sees the user interface side, but this is the programmatic side that you can interact with the same tool that you have this user interface that a lot of people are really familiar with.
yep, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking. Is like a firewall. Like everybody's managed a firewall.
Not everybody's managed GRC has not managed a firewall.
Well, I don't know your target audience. Obviously, you keep talking about GRC.
Well, and that's what I'm saying is that like this is definitely like this talk is in the I'm trying to like take it even out of the tech space a little bit and
I'm an Excel guy too. If I know what it is, I can usually come up with some really good analogies and metaphors too. Like I was explaining the difference between an IPS and IDS to this guy, and I was like, well, IDS is like the old man standing behind the screen door yelling at kids in the street. Hey, I see you over there. Hey, get off my lawn, blah, blah, blah. He's going to yell and scream all day, but he ain't going to do shit. That's what an IDS does.
An IDS rolls up with a bat in hand and
Right. Well, I mean, the IDS wouldn't even do that. It's just going to detect and set an alarm somewhere. hey, I see you out there. But an IPS, on the other hand.
Yeah, that's what I meant as IPS, yeah.
That can actually stop stuff.
The baseball bat in the trunk.
Right. So that, I mean, for me, I have all kinds of different ways to do that.
Yeah. If I had a couple more beers, I feel like I could come up with a couple more metaphors, but.
Well, I'm
right.
glad for this because it helps force me to learn what it is. I've seen APIs. They talk to me about, hey, we have some API traffic, blah, blah, blah. I don't care. Give me the source, the destination, and the port.
Yeah.
That's what I need to know.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, too, that's kind of all you really need for that stuff, right? Is
Exactly. So that's why it was showing 5%.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know. But yeah, nah, it's all good. Thank you so much, because that's why I came for this presentation.
Nice.
awesome.
Thanks for coming. It was good to see you.
Yeah, man.
Good
I'm
to
come
have
to
you
another
back
one.
out.
I got a case of beer waiting at the house for you guys next time.
Oh, yeah?
Wow.
Yeah.
We won't turn it down.
We'll be back next month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talking about ChatGPT, is that next month?
Second,
By next week, though, it's only going to be a 12-pack of beer.
Third Tuesday.
third Tuesday.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah. Thanks, Tim. It was a good presentation.
Thank you, Tim.
Just make sure you get ChatGPT to write it next time.
I am actually gonna sign up for it, and I'm gonna say write me a API, and I'm gonna see if it can do it in this security hitchhikers guide memes only. It'll probably spit out a better presentation than I, and at that point, I'm just gonna go look for another job.
I like it. All right. We're signing off here. Good night, guys.
Good night. Take care.
Bye.
You want cookies? Take them with you.